That night, I heard a faint sound, the creak of a doorknob turning. Slow, very slow. The sound was so small that no one should have noticed, but it made my heart pound like a hammer. I held my breath and looked toward the hallway. The dim light from the night lamp cast the shadow of a man moving quietly into Luna's room. My granddaughter's room. No knock, no words, just a tall, silent figure, and then the door closed behind him. I sat up straight, a chill running down my spine. In the house I built with my own hands, in the middle of a winter night, something was happening behind that door, and the instinct of a man who had faced hundreds of collapsing structures told me, if you don't stand up right now, something will break. Not wood, but a soul. If you have ever felt something wrong in your heart, but no one believed you, stay and hear this story. Because sometimes justice doesn't begin with a scream. It begins the moment you decide to stop pretending to sleep. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave the name of your city, so I know that somewhere out there, people still believe justice doesn't need noise. It only needs someone brave enough to stand up at the right moment. 6 o'clock in the morning. I was making coffee in my small kitchen on the outskirts of Portland, Maine, when the phone rang. The steady sound of the ring mixed with the winter wind blowing through the pine trees outside. I picked up. Mr. Benton? This is Emily Shaw, Luna's homeroom teacher. Her voice trembled slightly, polite but carrying the urgency only genuine concern could have. I froze. Is Luna all right? I asked, my heart tightening. On the other end, Ms. Shaw took a deep breath, then spoke slowly. Nothing life-threatening, at least not yet. But I think you should know. For 3 days straight, Luna has come to class looking exhausted, her sleeves pulled down over her wrists, and I caught a glimpse of a few bruises she tried to hide. Her eyes, they don't look sad, they look scared. I emailed her mother, Rachel, but haven't heard back. I gripped the phone tighter. The coffee suddenly tasted more bitter than usual. The teacher hesitated. I remember you because you used to drive Luna to school. She always said you were the only one who made her feel safe. That sentence cut like a small knife, soft but deep. In my mind, I saw her face. Dark brown hair, bright, gentle eyes, always asking about the bridges I used to design. Grandpa, are bridges ever afraid of the wind? I used to laugh. Bridges don't fear the wind, only weak foundations. And this morning I realized the foundation of my family was cracking. I said quietly, steadying my voice, Thank you, Miss Shaw. Thank you for calling me. What will you do? She asked. I'm going there. This morning. The road to my daughter's house was covered in fog. As the truck turned the bend, I saw the 2-story White House, the one I had. Spent nearly a year designing and building with materials from my own company. After more than 30 years supplying construction materials across Maine, I learned one thing. Nothing lasts if it's built to look good, but not built with decency. When Rachel remarried Tom Lewis, I gave them that house as a wedding gift. No debt, no conditions, just one line on the papers. Benton Family Trust. Ownership remained under my name in case something ever went wrong. I also opened a joint account at First National Bank, where I transferred money every month. A small amount meant only for Luna, so she would never lack anything. Now, looking at that house in the cold morning light, I felt a silence that wasn't natural. Tom's pickup truck was parked by the porch. A faint glow came from the upstairs window. I turned off the engine and walked slowly toward the gate. Through the kitchen window, I saw Luna setting the table while Rachel sat in a chair, her face weary. The girl lowered her head, carefully placing each plate. When she bent down, her sleeve slid back, revealing a bruise. Look carefully, Luna. How clumsy can you be? Rachel said without raising her head, her tone cold and hard. Tom, holding a newspaper, glanced over. She needs to learn to pay attention. In this house, whoever makes a mistake takes responsibility. Then he smiled faintly when he noticed me through the window. Oh, you're here early, sir? I stepped inside, pretending to be cheerful. I was passing by and thought I'd drop in to see how everyone's doing. The air inside was colder than outside. Rachel awkwardly poured me a cup of coffee. Luna stayed silent, only glancing at me before looking down. Nearby, a boy about 8 years old, Mason, Tom's son from his previous marriage, was running around the table, shouting. He deliberately knocked over a glass of milk, then burst out laughing as Rachel turned and yelled at Luna, "Can't you even watch an 8-year-old? Do you want everything in this house to fall apart?" I saw Luna's shoulders tremble. She apologized, kneeling to clean the spill, while Mason grinned and ran to Tom. The man patted his son's head and said gently, "It's okay. I know it was your sister's fault." That sentence felt like a hand squeezing my chest. In the house I built with my own hands, my granddaughter was treated like an outsider, while Tom's son was pampered like a little king. I looked at Rachel, her face pale as if carrying an invisible guilt. I knew her first marriage had left a scar, and now she was trying to atone by enduring. But that endurance was draining the light from her own daughter's eyes. I took a sip of coffee and said softly, "How's work, Rachel?" "The same, Dad," she replied, avoiding my gaze. Tom cut in. "We're planning to start a small business, but need capital. Might have to ask you to co-sign with the bank. You know, since the house is still in your name, they're asking questions." I smiled faintly, my tone lowering. "Let me know when you're ready, but remember, anything built by hand can be taken back by hand." Tom didn't catch the meaning. He just nodded and smiled. But I knew those weren't empty words. As I walked back to my truck, the sun rose over the distant forest. The light hit Luna's window, where the curtain was slightly open. Through the gap, I saw her looking down at me, fear and hope mixed in her eyes. I raised my hand to wave, but she only nodded slightly and closed the curtain. I stood still for a long moment. Ms. Shaw's words echoed again. She said, "You're the only one who makes her feel safe." And I knew this morning was only the beginning. If a house could become a place where a child feels fear, then the one who built it, me, must be the first to restore its meaning as a home. When I got back home, I sat at my desk for a long time, the coffee cold beside me. Outside, snow began to fall lightly, blurring the window glass. I reopened the bank ledger and looked at the familiar line. Joint account, Harold and Rachel for Luna's needs. The numbers remained steady, month after month, but my heart no longer could. I tapped my phone and opened an old picture of Luna from a field trip at Casco Bay, her bright smile holding a seashell, eyes shining like the ocean. Compared to the frightened look this morning, it felt like two different children. A teacher once told me, "Some cracks don't appear in concrete, they appear in homes built on silence." And I understood. If I didn't go back, that house might collapse before anyone realized it. I put on my coat and started the truck. The cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and the faint tang of iron from an old construction site. I decided to return to that house, not as a father, but as the man who built its foundation, and now had to inspect where it had begun to crack. That afternoon, the sky over Maine looked as if it were covered by a blanket of lead. I went to Rachel's house again, using the excuse of bringing some scrap pine wood for Tom to build a fence, when in truth, I just wanted to see Luna with my own eyes once more. As I stepped into the yard, the door opened, and Tom appeared with a half-smile. "Oh, you came again. How convenient. I was just thinking about that back fence." The way he said the words, "you came again," made me realize he didn't see me as family, but as an uninvited guest. Rachel came out behind him, quickly wiping her hands on a towel. "Dad, you didn't need to bring anything. I told you, I can manage." Her voice sounded tired, slightly tense. I noticed her eyes darting away, like someone afraid of being overheard. Luna stood behind the staircase, thinner than before. There was a faint mark on her left cheek, not deep, but if you've ever seen someone struck, you'd recognize it. She lowered her head when I looked at her, hiding her, hands behind her back. "Hello, Grandpa," she whispered, avoiding my gaze. "You look a bit tired. I said, keeping my tone calm. I'm fine, she replied, but her shoulders tightened. Rachel quickly added, Luna's just allergic to pollen, Dad. Don't worry. Tom chuckled dryly, folding his arms. Kids get bumps all the time. Toughens them up. I turned to look at him, his eyes dull, the kind that belonged to a man used to hiding his dominance behind a mask of control. They invited me to stay for dinner. I agreed, wanting to observe more. The meal took place in the bright kitchen where I used to sit when Rachel was little. Now it felt like a stage full of actors, a smug stepfather, a fearful mother, and a child forced into silence. Tom poured me wine, speaking with a superior tone. You know, sir, I'm planning to open a construction materials dealership near town. People say your experience could help a lot. Of course, only if you have the time. I smiled. I'm retired now. I only help those who truly need it. He nodded, the smile never reaching his eyes. I hope you still consider family as those who need it. I set the glass down and replied quietly, Family is something you maintain, not something you let decay. The air at the table froze for a beat. Rachel said nothing, cutting chicken with mechanical movements. Luna sat across from me, eating slowly, glancing at her mother each time she lifted her spoon, as if seeking permission. Mason, Tom's 8-year-old son, sat beside her, kicking her chair under the table. Dad, I don't want Luna sitting next to me. She dropped beans on my shirt. I'm sorry, Luna said softly, quickly wiping his shirt with a napkin. Tom laughed. Well, here comes our dinner hero again. Rachel slammed her knife down. Luna, can't you do anything right even once? The shout chilled my chest. The table went silent. Only the faint clinking of utensils remained. Mason smirked, satisfied with his small victory, then kept eating. I looked at Rachel, but her eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on Tom, as if waiting for his approval. In that moment, I understood. This house had rules, and those rules weren't built from love. I asked softly, Luna, do you still like to draw? The girl looked up and nodded gently. Yes, I still draw. Would you show me the one you're working on? Before Luna could answer, Tom cut in. She can show you later. No personal talk during meals. His voice was calm, but his gaze was enough to make Luna drop her eyes instantly. I swallowed my bite of chicken slowly, the bitterness catching in my throat. Something invisible was suffocating the room. Not the air, but a well-organized fear. When dinner ended, Rachel hurried to clear the plates, while Tom stepped away to take a call. Luna stood, pushing her chair back. As she reached to move it, her sleeve slid up, revealing a dark bruise along her wrist, stark under the light. She looked at me, blinking quickly, afraid I might ask. I said nothing. I just placed my hand lightly on her shoulder, a small touch, enough for her to know that I saw. Then I smiled, as if nothing was wrong, and whispered, That drawing you told me about, bring it to me sometime. I want to hang it in the workshop. Luna nodded slightly, and in her eyes I saw something more terrifying than pain. It was the habit of silence. I left as night fell. Through the rear-view mirror, the house stood there, lit, warm on the outside, but cold inside like a sealed warehouse. I took a deep breath, the scent of pine and night fog drifting through the crack of the truck window. Everything inside me felt heavy as wet steel. I knew I wouldn't sleep tonight, because a man who once worked as a firefighter cannot stay still when he sees a small flame quietly burning away the light in a child's eyes. I left Rachel's house just as night fell. Snow had begun to fall thickly, blanketing the road in white. I had driven for about 10 minutes when the car radio crackled to life. The announcer's voice, urgent. Weather alert, heavy snow and strong east winds across the Portland area. Drivers are advised not to travel at night, unless necessary. I turned on the signal and slowed down. In the rear-view mirror, the light from the house still glowed faintly yellow through the falling snow. I pulled over and sat quietly for a few seconds. Part of me said to keep driving home. The other part couldn't shake Luna's eyes, the mix of fear and plea. I sighed, then turned the wheel around. With this snow, no one would blame me for going back, I told myself. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going back because of the snow. I was going back because something inside me felt colder than the weather outside. I took out my phone and dialed Rachel. "The snow's getting heavy. I don't think it's safe to drive tonight. Mind if I stay in the living room?" Her voice hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "Of course, Dad. The sofa still has a blanket. I'll get it ready." From afar, Tom's voice cut in, half joking, half warning. "Make yourself at home, sir. Just don't step on the new rug." I gave a thin smile. Make yourself at home. Those words sounded both sour and strange, in the very house I had built with my own hands. I arrived a little after 9. Inside, only the small lamp in the living room was on. Tom sat before the TV, beer can in hand. Rachel was finishing dishes in the kitchen. Luna was already asleep. I spoke softly. "I'll stay the night. The roads are slick." Tom shrugged, eyes never leaving the screen. "Suit yourself." Rachel forced a small smile. "Would you like some tea, Dad?" I nodded. She brought me a cup, then went upstairs with Tom. The house grew quiet. The wind whispered through the doorframe, and the clock ticked in slow, heavy beats. I lay on the sofa, the blanket pulled to my chest, watching the faint glow of light spilling into the hallway. Then, close to midnight, I heard the hinge creak. A soft click. I held my breath. From the thin strip of light under the stairs, Tom's shadow appeared. He moved slowly, stealthily, like a man accustomed to walking into darkness. I watched as he made his way down the hall to Luna's room. The door opened slightly and the wooden floor creaked. I moved closer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. Through the narrow gap, the nightlight illuminated Luna's face. She sat curled on her bed, clutching her knees, trembling. Her voice was so small, I had to listen carefully to catch it. "I promise I'll be good. I'll say sorry to Mason. Please don't make me go outside again." Tom stood at the foot of her bed, his tone low and cold. "Kids need to learn responsibility. In this house, anyone who makes Mason cry gets punished." Luna shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean to. I just took back my notebook." "Shut up," he said and raised his hand. I saw Luna flinch, her small hand lifting to shield her face. The sharp crack that followed made my blood freeze. For a moment, I couldn't move. My grip tightened on the railing until the veins in my hand rose. I had faced fire, accidents, toxic smoke, but never fear and rage like this. He leaned in, voice dark with threat. "Try telling your grandpa, and see what happens." I backed away, hardly daring to breathe. His shadow withdrew from the room, climbed the stairs, and a door closed. The house fell silent again. I stood there for a long time, staring at Luna's half-closed door. The muffled sobs inside came in short bursts, like a bird trapped in a box. I returned to the sofa and sank, my chest tight and burning. In my mind, everything spun. The look in Tom's eyes, Luna's trembling voice, that sharp slap. I knew that if I stayed silent tonight, there would be more nights like this. Evil in quiet houses grows from the silence of adults. The next morning, Tom came into the kitchen, oddly cheerful. "Sleep well, sir?" I answered softly. "I heard some noise." He grinned, pouring coffee. "I'm planning to open that building supply business I mentioned. You used to be in the trade. You know how mortgage paperwork goes. If you'd agree to transfer the house title, the bank would approve it fast. Think of it as helping your son-in-law." I set the cup down and met his eyes. "This house is still in my name, Tom, and it will stay that way." Rachel sat beside him, head bowed. She avoided my eyes as if afraid of what I might ask. During breakfast, Rachel spoke hesitantly. "Dad, Luna's joining an art class. It's a bit expensive. If it's not too much trouble, could you transfer some extra into the joint account?" I asked. "What kind of class?" She bit her lip. "I don't remember the name. They said it's good for sensitive kids." Tom added, "Don't worry, sir. Investing in kids is never a waste. She needs discipline." Luna happened to walk by then, froze when she heard, her eyes flickering with fear before she hurried upstairs. In the dim light, the dark circles under her eyes were clearer than the bruises. I smiled faintly. You're right. Investing in children is never a waste. Let's just hope the money's used where it should be. Tom didn't answer, only curved his lips into a smile. When I went to my truck, Rachel followed me to the door. Dad, don't misunderstand. Tom just wants Luna to grow up right. I looked at her, my voice low. Some people use the word teach to hide cruelty. But what can a child learn from fear except silence? Rachel lowered her head, gripping her sleeve. I stepped outside. The snow had thickened. In the rearview mirror, I saw Luna behind the curtain, her pale face and eyes trying to say something she couldn't. I understood then what I saw last night was only the surface. Beneath it was a deeper pit opening up. And I, a man who had once pulled workers from the rubble of collapsed buildings, now had to save a child from the house I built myself. Over the weekend, I returned to Rachel's house with an envelope of cash I had just withdrawn from the bank, more than in any previous month. I spoke gently as I stepped inside. I withdrew a little extra, some for Luna's classes and a bit to get Mason something too. They're both children, no need for the boy to feel left out. Rachel looked surprised but managed a faint smile. You're too thoughtful, Dad. I'll handle it. Tom overheard and gave a half-smile. You're generous, sir. I wish I had an old man like that. I simply replied, some gifts aren't meant for pleasure. They're meant to show who knows how to use them. That afternoon, the snow began to melt, the sky still gray. The couple went out to the backyard, Tom sawing wood planks while Rachel measured with a tape. I said, Go ahead. I'll watch the kids inside. In the living room, Luna was coloring, and Mason was rummaging through his toy box. I leaned down and asked quietly, Do you want to go outside and help your mom? She shook her head. No, sir. Mom said I should stay inside. I nodded, then whispered, Step out to the front porch for a moment. I want to see the angle for your drawing from last week. Luna obeyed, holding her sketchbook, stepping onto the porch. I used that moment to move quickly upstairs into her room. The small space had cream walls, a tidy bed, and on the desk lay colored pencils and a half-finished drawing of a bridge, still incomplete. I took a small black micro camera from my coat pocket and placed it neatly on the bookshelf facing the bed, hidden behind an old doll. I adjusted the angle, connected the backup power, and everything was perfect. The phone screen showed a clear image, the bed and half the desk visible under natural light. I took a deep breath and typed a line in the notes on my phone. I never thought the day would come when I'd install a camera in the very house I built. But perhaps only when a home hides shadows does the builder owe it light. Just as I left the room, through the window I saw in the yard Mason playing with a plastic shovel, knocking over a packed snow fort, scattering it apart. The boy yelled, Mom! Luna broke my snow fort! Luna froze a few steps away, her face pale. Tom shouted from afar, What now? Mason's crying again? Rachel turned tense. Luna, get inside now. I stood at the window above, knowing for certain that tonight would not be quiet. When I left later, Rachel thanked me for the tuition money, and Tom clapped my shoulder. Don't worry, sir. I'll make sure the kids grow up right. I only nodded, saying nothing. On the drive home, I checked my phone. The camera displayed device active. The live feed showed Luna's room, empty, the nightlight softly glowing amber. Around 10:30 that night, I sat in my woodworking shop, opened my old laptop, and connected the feed. The screen flickered on, showing Luna's room. She sat curled on the bed, hugging her knees, eyes wide toward the door. Then the door opened. Tom walked in, same wrinkled shirt, belt in hand. Stand up, his voice low and cold. You made Mason cry, didn't you? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to? He sneered. In this house, everyone faces consequences. Kneel. Luna whimpered, Please don't, then sank to her knees, her small shoulders trembling. He raised his hand and slapped her. The sharp crack through the laptop speaker made the entire workshop fall silent, as if all sound had been drained from the world. "Do you know why?" he growled. "Because I made him sad." "No, because you don't know your place." He unbuckled the belt. The sound of leather striking skin cut through the air. Luna flinched, tears falling, but she didn't cry out. "Don't cry. If your grandpa finds out, it'll be worse." I sat frozen in the shop, my hands shaking, almost dropping the mouse. The footage trembled, but I kept the recording on. Each lash, each stifled sob, was a knife in the chest of a father. The door opened again. Rachel stood there, hands clenched, saying nothing. She looked, then turned away. The door closed, and it went on. When Tom finally left, Luna stayed on the floor, breathing in short, broken gasps, then crawled onto her bed and cried soundlessly into her pillow. I turned off the screen, but the image burned behind my eyes like a wound that would not heal. Outside, the wind howled through the stacked lumber by the shop. Inside me, there was only silence, the kind a man hears when a concrete beam begins to crack, knowing it will collapse, but not yet able to save what's beneath it. The next morning, Portland was still wrapped in cold fog. I brewed a cup of coffee, set the laptop on the table, and replayed the video from the night before. The wind outside the door blended with Luna's broken breaths, coming through the speaker. Faint, but sharp enough to pierce the heart. I pressed pause. The frame froze at the moment Tom's hand was raised, and Rachel stood motionless in the doorway. I copied the video onto a new USB drive, printed still frames from each key moment, and sealed them in a brown evidence folder. On the cover, in black ink, I scrawled, "Evidence Pack, Lewis House or Child Abuse." I sealed the flap with a small red wax stamp, the same kind I used to close material reports and shipment records back when I was coordinating construction sites. The smell of hot wax filled the air, bringing back memories of the days when I counted bricks and steel beams one by one, signing every document before handing them to the crew. When you live by integrity, every signature is a promise. I called Ms. Emily Shaw. "Ms. Shaw, I know what's been happening, and I need a witness." Her voice trembled. You have real evidence?" "I do," I said, "and I won't let that girl suffer another day." She took a deep breath. "I'm ready. I can testify to Luna's condition before, her bruises, fear, and withdrawn behavior. I'll stand by her if needed." I said quietly, "Thank you, Ms. Emily. Not everyone dares to stand beside a child when the guilty one is an adult." After hanging up, I opened my old brown leather notebook and began recording every detail: date, time, and location, behavior, words, physical marks. I numbered each entry, signed and dated every page. At the bottom of each one, I added my blue ink electronic signature. It was no longer a habit of my profession. It was a record for justice. While reviewing the old Benton family trust documents, I remembered the moral conduct clause, the ethical provision attorney James Holloway had once advised me to include. I called him immediately. "James, I need to confirm the conduct clause. If the beneficiary of the house commits serious misconduct, I have the right to reclaim it, correct?" His deep, steady voice came through. "That's right, Harold. Your trust remains fully valid. If they abuse a child or misuse the property, you have full authority to revoke it. No court required. Just file documentation, notify them, and have clear evidence." I nodded, writing in my notebook. Moral Conduct Clause, Section 4, valid and executable. That afternoon, I opened the joint account statement. Joint account, Harold and Rachel for Luna's needs. Every transaction appeared neatly listed. Art tuition, $280. School supplies, $145. Gift for child, $320. But when I cross-checked the merchant codes, they all trace back to Toy World and Bike Zone, stores for toys, clothes, and Mason's new bicycle. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. My own voice echoed in my mind, whispering between my teeth. I let them withdraw money in my granddaughter's name. They've used my trust to feed their deceit. Now I'll reclaim the house and the title of parent they've already forfeited. I organized the files, placing everything into the leather briefcase. USB, prints, statements, journal, photos, and a copy of the trust, all in order. Finally, I scrolled through my contacts until I stopped on an old name. Date: Alvarez, the investigator I had once worked with on several construction safety and accident inspections. I called. Alvarez speaking. It's me, Harold Benton. A brief pause, then his voice lowered. Been a long time, my friend. Is it serious? I need to meet you. There's a child who needs saving, and I have the proof. I don't want to call 911. I want someone who still knows what real justice means. He replied, Send me the address. I'm coming. I looked around the workshop, sunlight slanting through the dust and wood shavings, casting golden beams across the table. The files lay ready. I closed the notebook and added one more line. December 15th, handed over evidence to Date Alvarez. The rescue of the child named Benton begins. That night, Portland dropped to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind howled through the pine trees, blowing loose snow across the driveway. I placed a tray of freshly baked pastries in the truck and covered it with a wool blanket. Using the excuse of bringing some treats for Mason, I drove back to Rachel's house. My breath turned white in the air as I drove, and Alvarez's voice echoed in my head. If you have the evidence, I'll alert the local patrol unit. But be careful. Don't go alone. I had replied, I'm not going there to fight. I'm going there to end it. As the truck turned onto their street, the porch light revealed a small figure huddled on the front steps. Luna. No coat, no socks, just thin pajamas. Arms wrapped around her knees, head bowed low. Snow clung to her hair, her shoulders trembling nonstop. I slammed the brakes. Heart pounding, breath caught in my throat. I hurried toward her. Luna, what are you doing out here? She looked up, lips blue, voice shaking. Mom said, I'm punished. No dinner. The words cut through me like metal. I pulled off my coat and wrapped it around her, then pounded on the door. Rachel opened it, her face pale. Dad, please. It's just discipline. She talked back to Mason. Tom got upset. From the dining table, Tom's voice carried out, calm and indifferent. Discipline is necessary. In this house, those who make mistakes learn consequences. I looked at him, the light catching the hard lines of his face, his eyes void of remorse. I stepped inside, still holding Luna in my arms, snow melting into icy drops on her hair. Consequences, I said, my voice low and rough. I've seen plenty of consequences, Tom, but I've never seen a grown man use a child as a tool to prove his power. He stood up, trying to keep his composure. You have no authority in my house. I met his gaze, each word like a hammer striking steel. This house is still in my name, and tonight it chooses its owner again. I laid Luna on the sofa, wrapped her in a blanket, and turned to Rachel. Get warm water. Call 911. She trembled but obeyed. When the ambulance arrived, red and blue lights flashed against the snow. The EMT checked her vitals, murmuring, core temperature about 88 Fahrenheit, around 31 Celsius. Stage 2 hypothermia. Another 30 minutes, and it would have been life-threatening. I stood beside them, my fists clenched until the veins stood out, breath steaming in the freezing air. Just then, Harriet, the neighbor from the house next door, hurried over. A widow living alone, she had often watched Luna when Rachel was at work. The two were close. Luna used to call her Miss Hattie, bringing cookies every weekend as a small ritual. But lately, Harriet said, the visits had stopped. The girl's changed, Mr. Benton, Harriet said, voice trembling but resolute. Her eyes are so sad. I've seen her standing outside in the cold, no coat, while that boy Mason laughs. I started paying attention. She gripped her phone tightly, its glow lighting her lined, angry face. Tonight, I heard a little scream. I looked through the curtain and saw everything. I recorded it. She played the video. Shaky but clear, Luna crouched on the porch, bare hands, while Tom shoved her out and locked the door. Mason's cries echoed inside, mixed with Rachel's voice yelling, "Let her learn her lesson!" Harriet swallowed hard, eyes wet. I didn't dare interfere. I was scared he'd snap. But I swear, I'll testify. No one treats a child like that, not the little girl who used to knock on my door with cookies and call me Grandma Hattie. I nodded, eyes stinging. Thank you, Harriet. Tonight you didn't just record a video. You preserved justice for a child. I turned to Tom, his face flushed red, voice rising through clenched teeth. What are you people doing? This is a family matter. My voice cut through him like ice. No, this is a crime, and crime is never just a family matter. 2 officers arrived with the EMTs. One examined the scene, the other took notes. Luna was lifted onto the stretcher, her frightened yet trusting eyes fixed on me. I bent down, took her hand. I'm here now. No one will ever touch you again. As the ambulance drove off, its lights flashing across Tom's face, he shouted, "I'll sue you! You can't take my house!" I turned back, meeting his eyes, my voice low and cold enough to make him step back. Rights? Rights come from responsibility, Tom. You failed to protect a child, so don't talk to me about rights. This house was built with love, but tonight it chose again. The wind rose, swirling snow around the porch. Rachel stood frozen, speechless. Harriet handed me her phone with the video, her hand cold and shaking. I'll testify. That child doesn't deserve this. I nodded and said softly, "Thank you." Sometimes justice begins with the one person brave enough to open the door when they hear a cry. When the police left, I sat on the steps, staring at the deep tire tracks left by the ambulance in the snow. The lights in Tom's house still burned, but from that moment on, it was no longer a place of fear. I pulled out my notebook and wrote the final line of the night. December 16th, Luna saved. The house has chosen its rightful owner. That night, the ambulance took Luna straight to Maine Medical Center in Portland. I followed behind, the wind slicing across my face like a blade. When we entered the emergency wing, the medical staff took the stretcher and moved her into an examination room. A young doctor with round glasses studied the monitor, then shook his head slightly. Core temperature, 31 Celsius. Stage 2 hypothermia. And... He paused, pointing to the bruises on her wrists, back, and knees. These aren't from one incident. They're signs of long-term abuse. I stood still, both fists clenched. In my head, I could still hear the sound of the belt, the muffled sobs through the laptop speakers. Now those sounds had become medical data, living evidence. When the EMTs finished their report, 2 county officers arrived. One read the charge aloud. Child endangerment. Conduct placing a minor in danger of serious injury or death. The other wrote it down and asked for my witness signature. I signed, the pen trembling, not from fear, but from the pressure of finally releasing everything I had held in. About an hour later, Alvarez arrived, snow on his coat, eyes steady. "Harold, thank you for coming so quickly." I handed him the briefcase. Inside, the USB with the video, printed stills, bank statements, and the journal. Alvarez opened his laptop and played the footage. Tom striking Luna, Rachel standing frozen, the dry, hollow sound of violence. When it ended, he closed the lid and spoke in a slow, deliberate tone. "This is more than enough. I'll forward it directly to the district attorney's office. For now, they'll both be questioned tonight." I nodded. For the first time in days, what filled me wasn't anger. It was the calm of someone finally walking toward justice. When Luna was moved to the recovery room, a nurse wrapped her in warm blankets and placed a heater by her bed. Her face had regained some color, though her eyes stayed closed. I sat beside her, holding her small hand, feeling the faint but steady pulse beneath my fingers. The door opened softly. Rachel stepped in, eyes red, hands gripping her coat pockets. She stood there a long moment before whispering, "Dad." I didn't dare stand up to Tom. I was afraid he'd leave me. I turned to her. Under the fluorescent light reflecting off the white tiles, I saw my daughter's face, the same girl who once laughed in the apple orchard, now pale, distorted by fear. I spoke slowly, every word heavy. "You're afraid of losing your husband, but you're not afraid of losing your child." Rachel froze, tears sliding down her chin. "You don't understand," she choked. "Since the divorce from Mark, I've lost everything. People looked at me as if I were a failure. Then Tom came along. He made me feel safe, protected. I didn't want to lose that again." I stepped closer, voice low and rough. "So you let him take your daughter instead?" Rachel buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "Every time I look at Luna, I see Mark. Her eyes, her voice, even the way she looks at me. It's like seeing the mistake that ruined me. Sometimes I just wanted to forget. Tom said if I listened to him, everything would be fine." I stood silent. In that moment, I saw both the little girl who once hid behind me during thunderstorms and the woman who had given her strength away to the fear of being abandoned. "Rachel," I said quietly, "children aren't guilty. They don't deserve punishment because we can't heal our own pain. You've turned your past into chains for an innocent child." She lifted her tear-streaked face. "Dad, I didn't mean to hurt her. I just didn't know what to do anymore." I shook my head, voice like steel. "No, you didn't know. You knew and you chose silence. You were so afraid of losing your husband that you let him steal the part of you that makes you a mother. And that," I paused, taking a deep breath, "is something I will never forgive." Rachel broke down, crying into her hands. I didn't touch her. Some lessons a father cannot teach with words. They must be learned through consequence. I turned back to the hospital bed, watching Luna sleep, her fragile face calm beneath the warm blankets. "She's been paying for the mistakes you couldn't face," I murmured, not sure if I spoke to Rachel or myself. "But from now on, no one else will bear them." Alvarez returned, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I've contacted the county court. You'll need to file for a protection from abuse order and an ex parte temporary guardianship. With the video, medical report, and witnesses, the court will prioritize it within 24 hours. I nodded softly. "I've waited for this, not to win, but to end it." When Rachel left, Alvarez stood by the window, watching snow drift across the parking lot. "You know, Harold," he said in a rough voice, "I've seen a lot of cases like this, but rarely does anyone go all the way. Most people stay silent because it's family business." I replied without looking at him. "Silence only helps the guilty sleep better. The ones with a conscience, they never sleep again." Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the monitor beeped softly with each heartbeat. I stayed beside Luna until morning, watching her rest peacefully beneath the blankets, and wrote one more line in my journal. December 17th, hospital report confirmed. Luna safe, justice in motion. A week later, the ice melted in Portland. Late winter sunlight touched the roof of my house with a pale gold shimmer. I called everyone for what I called a family reconciliation dinner. Tom accepted so quickly that it surprised me. "Finally, someone ready to talk sense. I'll come, and we'll clear up all the misunderstandings." Rachel just said quietly, "I'll be there, Dad." As for Harriet, Emily Shaw, and Attorney Holloway, they knew exactly what I was preparing. No one asked questions. They simply said, "We'll be there." I set a long oak table in the center of the room, warm yellow light glinting off red wine. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the house, but under it was something fragile, like a mirror about to crack. Tom arrived first in a dark suit, flashing a polite smile. "Nice dinner, Harold. Seems you do know how to reconcile." I answered evenly. Sometimes reconciliation is just a formality. What matters is whether a man dares to face himself. He smirked. "Courage? I've never lacked that." Rachel came in next, holding Mason's hand, avoiding my eyes. The boy sat beside Tom, fidgeting with his spoon. Across from them sat Emily, Harriet, and Holloway, the three silent witnesses, their calm eyes already knowing what was coming. Dinner began. Cutlery clinked lightly. Wine poured. I made small talk, asking Mason about school, Emily about work. No one mentioned the real reason we were there. At exactly 8 o'clock, I stood, voice steady. I didn't invite you here just to eat. I invited you to speak the truth. I walked to the corner and picked up the remote. The television flicked on, filling the wall with light. The footage appeared. Luna's bedroom. Dim yellow light. Tom's cold voice. Stand up, kneel. The sound of the belt cutting the air. Luna's muffled sobs. Then Rachel's silhouette in the doorway, hands clenched, silent. No one spoke. Only the sound of the past colliding with the present. Tom froze, face draining of color. Rachel dropped her fork, tears spilling. Harriet gripped the edge of the table. Emily covered her mouth. Tom shot to his feet, shouting hoarsely, You set me up. You spied on me with cameras. This is an invasion of privacy. I met his eyes, voice low and unnervingly calm. No, Tom. This is justice. Privacy ends the moment a man turns his home into a place of cruelty. I opened the briefcase, taking out a USB and a paper sealed with a red stamp. I placed both on the table. This is the trust revocation notice. Termination of your rights to the house under the moral conduct clause. This home was once a gift. Tonight, it becomes evidence. Tom stepped back, his face twisting with rage. You can't, I cut him off. I can, and I already have. Attorney Holloway drafted and executed this himself. Holloway nodded firmly. All clauses are active. The trust is effective immediately. Rachel bowed her head, tears soaking the white napkin. Dad, I'm sorry. Harriet laid a steady hand on her shoulder. We all make mistakes, but no one has the right to stay silent after seeing this. Emily turned to Tom, voice trembling, but clear. I'll testify for Luna. No one else spoke. Only heavy breathing, the ticking clock, and the frozen image on the screen. Luna's tearful face, no longer afraid. I looked around the table, once a symbol of family, now a courtroom, with truth presiding. I used to think silence protected dignity, I said slowly, but silence only prolongs deceit. Tonight, the truth has been shown, and no one can turn it off again. Tom threw his napkin, storming toward the door, but it opened first. Alvarez stepped in with 2 officers. Thomas Lewis, his voice rang through the silent room. You are under arrest for child abuse and endangering a minor. The last sound in the room was the metallic click of handcuffs. Tom was escorted out of the house, his face still red with rage. Rachel collapsed into a chair, her trembling hands resting on her knees, while the warm yellow light from the chandelier reflected off the half-finished glasses of wine. I looked around. The same table that once served as a family dinner now stood as a courtroom, with justice presiding. Alvarez gave me a brief nod before leaving. I'll file the report with the district attorney tonight, he said. From here on, let the law finish the rest. The door closed. Silence returned, not the silence of concealment, but of closure. I sat down, staring at the trust revocation notice on the table. The golden light fell across the bolded words, Benton Family Trust. Property, reversion executed. It was over. The dinner of reconciliation had become the dinner of truth. The next morning, frost still clung to the rooftops when Alvarez called. Tom Lewis is in custody at Cumberland County Jail, he said. Charges child abuse, endangerment, and obstruction. As for Rachel, the DA will press negligent supervision, but recommend probation and mandatory counseling. I stayed quiet for a long moment. Part of me wanted to feel relief, but what came instead was emptiness, like the sound of wind passing through an unfinished frame. That afternoon, I was summoned to the county courthouse to sign the order. The judge read it aloud slowly. Temporary emergency custody of minor Luna Benton is hereby granted to Mr. Harold Benton, legal guardian and trustee of the Benton Family Trust. That document was more than procedure. It was proof that truth still held weight in a world built on compromise. By evening, the Portland Gazette headline read, "Retired builder exposes domestic abuse. Grandfather saves granddaughter from violence." The accompanying photo showed me standing on the courthouse steps, holding a folder, with Alvarez and Attorney Holloway behind me. The article said, Harold Benton, a retired construction supplier, collected evidence and invoked the Moral Conduct Clause in the Benton Family Trust to reclaim property and protect his granddaughter from an abusive household. His actions are seen as a model of moral accountability in family abuse cases. When I brought Luna home, Portland lay beneath the soft orange glow of dusk. She sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket, staring out the window. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner." I placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "You have nothing to be sorry for. It's the grown-ups who must relearn how to be human, and I'll teach them with truth, not hatred." The truck rolled past snow-dusted pines. In the rear-view mirror, I caught the reflection of Luna's eyes, no longer afraid, only quietly at peace. That night, in my journal, I wrote, December 21st, justice entered the house. The home no longer belongs to the powerful, but to the truthful. 2 months later, in early March, snow drifted down thin as chalk dust. I stood before the Cumberland County Courthouse, watching the Maine flags ripple in the wind. Behind the glass walls, Tom Lewis's trial was about to begin. The courtroom was fuller than I expected. Local reporters, social workers, and neighbors who once knew Rachel filled the benches. Alvarez sat in the front row, while Attorney Holloway stood beside me, resting a calm hand on the file, a gesture both reassuring and final, as if to close the long journey of truth. When Tom was led in, he still wore that smug expression, but the eyes that once controlled others now looked hollow. His orange jumpsuit glared under the lights. He kept his head down, avoiding cameras, yet every lens stayed fixed on him, as if the whole town was staring into the darkness he once hid behind closed doors. The prosecutor began reading the charges. Thomas Lewis is charged with domestic violence assault against a minor, endangering the welfare of a child, and obstruction of justice. Evidence includes video recordings, medical documentation, witness testimony, and confirmation of repeated intentional abuse. The state recommends 10 years of incarceration and a lifetime no-contact order with minors. The room fell silent, broken only by the steady sound of the judge's pen moving across paper. Then Rachel took the stand. Her face was drawn after weeks of mandatory counseling. Her voice trembled but remained clear. "I don't deserve to be called a mother. I let money and the fear of losing my husband blind me. My silence almost cost my daughter her life. No apologies can't undo the past, but I'll learn again how to protect, not to bow." Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. Under the cold light of the courtroom, I saw not the broken woman from that hospital night, but someone rising again from ashes. The judge nodded and turned to me. "Mr. Harold Benton, would you like to address the court before sentencing?" I rose. Each step echoed slowly and solidly, like a hammer striking wood in my old workshop. My voice was low but steady. "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about teaching limits. I don't hate anyone here. I only want people to understand this. When adults forget their boundaries, children lose their childhoods. And when a house becomes a place of fear, the one who built it must be the first to rebuild. Not with bricks, but with courage." The room stayed quiet. Alvarez bowed his head and Holloway gave a silent nod. The judge delivered the verdict in a voice firm, yet not cold. Defendant Thomas Lewis is sentenced to 8 years of imprisonment, 2 years suspended, followed by 4 years of probation. He is prohibited from any contact with minors and must complete an anger management program. Defendant Rachel Lewis is granted 2 years probation with mandatory participation in the Parent Rehabilitation and Counseling Program. Full legal guardianship of minor Luna Benton is awarded to her grandfather, Mr. Harold Benton. The gavel struck 3 times. The sound echoed through the room, the sound of one chapter closing. As I stepped outside, the cold wind cut across my face, yet I felt lighter than ever. In the distance, I saw Luna waiting with Miss Emily and Alvarez. She ran toward me, wrapping her small arms around my waist, whispering, "Grandpa, it's over now, right?" I brushed her hair gently. "Not yet, Luna. But today, justice found its way home." 1 year had passed since the Cumberland County trial. That spring arrived early. The forest behind the property had already budded, and the small stream running through the garden was so clear I could see every pebble beneath the surface. I stood in the yard, the same patch of grass that once led to the back porch, where everything began. Rachel's old house looked different now. I'd repainted every wall, replaced the frames, fixed the roof, and rebuilt the wooden fence by hand, the same way I had built my first project 40 years ago. Above the gate, a new brass plaque gleamed. Luna's Haven, safe home for children. The house had become a shelter for abused or abandoned children in partnership with Maine DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services. I funded it myself. Emily Shaw managed operations, supported by Alvarez and a few of my old construction colleagues, people who offered their hands, not for fame, but for purpose. Each morning, Luna rose early to water the garden. She was 15 now, taller, her hair shoulder length, still quiet, but her smile had returned, genuine and unafraid. On the living room wall hung an old photo of us taken at Casco Bay, beneath which I had engraved, "Where there is trust, there is home." Luna excelled in art and joined her school's girls' basketball team. Every night she still drew, paintings filled with light instead of gray. Once I asked, "What are you drawing this time?" She replied, "I'm painting our house, Grandpa, but this time the windows open on both sides." Her answer left me silent. A child once trapped by fear was now teaching me what rebirth truly meant. One afternoon, while checking the new railing, a letter arrived from Rachel. The envelope was thin, her handwriting shaky yet careful. "Dad, I've completed my first therapy program. I'm living near Mason's school and working again at a small hardware store. I know what I did was unforgivable. I don't deserve to be called a mother, but if possible, I'd like to see Luna, just to say one thing. I don't expect forgiveness, only the chance to see that she's well. Rachel." I sat for a long time, listening to the steady buzz of saws outside, volunteers rebuilding what others had once broken. I picked up my pen and wrote a single line in reply. "Forgiveness is conditional, and the condition is learning to be a mother again." I added nothing more. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about opening the door. It's about letting someone find the right key. That evening, Luna sat sketching in her room, light from the lamp tracing her calm outline. I realized we were both healing, she through art and I through action. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote, March 15th. Luna's Haven welcomed its first child from Bangor. The house lives again, and so does her heart. Golden dusk settled over Portland, soft as honey. The last light of day slanted through the pines and spilled across the front yard of Luna's Haven, where the children were playing ball. Their laughter rang bright, bouncing off the wooden walls and echoing back like the sound of life itself. Among them, Luna stood out, with her dark brown hair and radiant smile. She tossed the ball high, catching it again amid cheers. No more fear, no more shrinking into silence, only pure joy, the kind that, a year ago, felt impossible. I sat on the porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, the scent of roast beans mixed with fresh paint and wildflowers at the edge of the yard. In front of me, sunlight glimmered on the brass plaque at the gate, engraved in my own hand. Justice doesn't shout, it signs its name. I opened my worn leather notebook and wrote the final line. I built this house with my hands and reclaimed it with the truth. When I finished, I looked up, listening to the wind sweep through the porch beams. For the first time in many years, I felt at peace. Near dusk, a silver car stopped by the gate. Rachel stepped out, holding a small bouquet, with Mason at her side. They stood there for a long while, not entering, just placing the flowers before the plaque. I rose to go out, but paused on the porch steps. Rachel lifted her gaze and met mine. No words, no tears, only a small nod, an acknowledgement that she understood and was learning anew. Mason bent to pick up a stray ball, tossing it gently back toward Luna. She caught it, smiled softly, and nodded in return. It was simple, quiet, but in that silence I knew the cycle of harm had ended. I turned back toward the porch, watching the scene. The house that once fell apart under silence, now standing firm on truth. I murmured, not sure to whom. No house ever collapses for lack of walls, only when people forget to keep their hearts warm. The evening wind carried laughter, the thud of a ball, and the fading aroma of coffee. I closed my eyes, letting peace settle into every breath. Beside me, the brass plaque glowed one last time under the setting sun, steady, wordless, a reminder that justice doesn't need to be loud, only timely and true. Someone once asked me, "Do you regret standing against your own daughter?" I'd thought long about that. But tonight, watching Luna play in the sunset, I finally had an answer. No, I don't regret it, because sometimes protecting the ones you love doesn't mean shielding their mistakes. It means standing firm so they never repeat them. Justice doesn't come from a courtroom or a headline. It comes the moment you choose not to stay silent. This house was once a symbol of pain. Now it's the beginning of trust, not just for Luna, but for every child who ever thought they'd been forgotten. I know it will take years before Rachel truly earns forgiveness, but forgiveness, when it comes, will be born from action, not words. And Mason, the boy who once saw the worst, will grow up learning the better kind of world, one where people stop before they hurt. I looked at the brass plaque once more before going inside. The evening light shimmered over the engraved words. Justice doesn't shout, it signs its name. I smiled and whispered to myself, maybe I didn't save the world, but I saved one home, and sometimes that's enough. If you've ever been hurt by the people you trusted most, if you've ever believed that silence was the safer choice, remember this. Silence protects the abuser, never the abused. Justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs a heart brave enough to say, "This ends here." Subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this story. So somewhere out there, someone suffering in silence will know they are not alone. And leave your city's name below, because across America, there are still people who believe in quiet justice.